Have you ever noticed how certain family members seem to bring nothing but stress, anxiety, or emotional turmoil whenever they pop into your life? As you pass 70, it becomes more important than ever to guard your well-being and peace of mind. You've already navigated decades of life's ups and downs, collected wisdom, and grown into the person you are today. So, why allow toxic relatives to undermine your health, happiness, or sense of self? In this discussion, I want to explore 5 types of toxic family members whom you'd be better off distancing yourself from once you turn 70. You might not be able to remove these individuals from your family tree entirely, but you can limit their ability to disrupt your well-deserved tranquility. By the end, you'll have clearer insight into how to identify these toxic dynamics, as well as practical approaches to ensure your emotional and mental wellness remain top priority. After all, you've worked too hard and come too far in life to let anyone, relative or not, drag you into unnecessary conflict or distress. Let's first acknowledge why people often find it so difficult to cut off or reduce contact with toxic relatives. There's a long-standing belief that blood is thicker than water, that family bonds should remain unbreakable no matter how they affect us. While loyalty and love are beautiful values, they shouldn't force you into enduring emotional harm. At 70 or beyond, your energy levels and emotional reserves become precious resources. Investing them in relationships that repeatedly cause pain or drama can wear you down physically, mentally, and even spiritually. It's not about being cruel or uncaring. Rather, it's about recognizing your own needs and limits. You're not turning your back on family when you set boundaries. You're simply refusing to sacrifice your well-being for the sake of people who've shown little respect for it. If your relatives genuinely care about you, they'll understand that these boundaries are your way of maintaining harmony and health. And if they can't comprehend that or choose to take offense, well, that reaction is on them, not on you. You deserve relationships that uplift you, not weigh you down. One scenario you might relate to is having a cousin or sibling who excels at triggering guilt, shame, or a sense of obligation in you. Perhaps they always call when they need money but disappear when you could use emotional support. Maybe they show up only during family gatherings, tossing out critical remarks about your lifestyle or how you've managed your retirement. You find yourself walking on eggshells around them, fearful that saying the wrong thing will spark a blow-up. Over time, that stress accumulates, leading to headaches, disturbed sleep, or even elevated blood pressure. When you reach your 70s, your body is less forgiving about these stressors. Prolonged tension can weaken your immune system, worsen chronic conditions, or simply sap away the joy of daily living. That's why recognizing and limiting toxic patterns is far from selfish. It's a matter of self-preservation. So let's delve into the 5 types of relatives you should be wary of after hitting 70, keeping in mind that each category can overlap and that you may spot traits of more than one type in the same person. Understanding the dynamics is the first step toward regaining your emotional freedom. One type of toxic relative is the constant critic, the person who seems to have made it their life's mission to point out your flaws, mistakes, or perceived failings. They rarely offer constructive advice. It's all about highlighting how you could be doing better, or worse, how you never do anything right. Maybe it's a sister who belittles your housekeeping, a nephew who mocks your technological limitations, or a brother who condescendingly teases you about your cooking. At this point in your life, you've earned the right to a bit of comfort and self-esteem. While it's normal for families to joke around or even occasionally criticize each other, the constant critic crosses the line by making their negativity chronic. Every phone call or holiday visit becomes another lecture or a chance for them to tear you down. The effect can be a slow but persistent erosion of confidence. You might notice you're second-guessing your decisions, feeling uneasy in your own home, or anxious whenever you see their name pop up on your phone. Why endure it? Politeness might have kept you quiet in the past, but after 70, it's entirely reasonable to say, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not interested in discussing this right now," and then change the subject or walk away if they persist. You could also limit your interactions to large family gatherings where you can avoid one-on-one confrontations. Some constant critics thrive on your reaction, so offering minimal emotional response can sometimes deflate their efforts. Ultimately, your peace is worth more than their so-called opinions. Another toxic dynamic comes from the family manipulator, the relative who twists situations, facts, or your emotions to get what they want. Often they're experts at guilt trips, employing sentences like, "If you really loved me, you'd do this for me," or "I guess I'm not important to you anymore." They might paint themselves as victims, leveraging your sympathy and sense of familial obligation. You might find yourself giving them money, letting them move into your home, or bailing them out of bad choices, simply because you can't bear to be labeled as unloving or uncaring. Especially in older age, you might feel extra pressure to keep the peace or ensure the family remains intact. The family manipulator counts on that. They rely on your fear of conflict or your desire to be a good person. But this dynamic can be draining, financially and emotionally. It can also sow tension among other family members, especially if they see that you're constantly enabling the manipulator's behavior. The best antidote is setting firm boundaries and being prepared for pushback. If they ask for money, ask for documentation of how it will be used, or suggest they see a financial counselor. If they demand your time or resources, calmly say, "I wish I could help, but that's not possible right now." Don't offer long explanations or apologies. The manipulator thrives on making you feel obligated, so the less you engage, the less power they have. Over time, this might cause them to look elsewhere for an easier target, freeing you to enjoy your later years without constant emotional blackmail. The third category is the resentful dependent, a relative who relies on you for emotional or financial support, yet simultaneously harbors resentment toward you. Sometimes it's an adult child who never quite found their footing, expecting you to solve every crisis, pay every bill, or bail them out of every poor decision. At the same time, they speak to you with bitterness or frustration, as though you personally engineered their problems. They might claim you never did enough for them as children or that you owe them for perceived parental failings. While you might feel a sense of duty to help them, that duty doesn't extend to accepting disrespect, manipulation, or unceasing negativity. This dynamic often places older adults in a heartbreaking position. You want your child or grandchild to succeed, but you can't keep carrying the emotional and financial burden as they lash out at you. If you're not careful, this relationship can stifle your own well-being. Maybe you give them rent money you need for medical bills, or you find yourself depressed after every conversation because they blame you for everything. The key is to provide assistance with conditions. If they truly need a loan, consider setting up a formal agreement that outlines repayment terms. If they want your emotional support, make sure you're not subjecting yourself to verbal abuse or constant blame. Don't hesitate to suggest counseling or job training programs for them. If they refuse these solutions and choose to remain bitter, you have every right to say, "I love you, but I can't keep dealing with this hostility. My health and peace of mind matter too." The younger generation might see your stance as harsh, but remember, you're preserving your life from a never-ending cycle of resentment and guilt. But that's not abandonment, that's self-protection. Fourth, we have the drama addict, the relative who seems to thrive on conflict and tension, orchestrating fights or controversies out of thin air. Whether it's an aunt who constantly gossips, a cousin who brings up divisive topics at every family dinner, or a nephew who picks a fight whenever you gather. These individuals feed on the chaos they create. For older adults seeking a peaceful life, drama addicts can be particularly destabilizing. You may have spent your earlier years mediating or playing peacemaker, but now it's time to pass on that role. Why get pulled into heated debates about political issues or family feuds that never truly resolve? The drama addict's presence can raise your stress hormones, making you feel drained and tense. A single day of their antics might take you a week to recover from, especially if it ends in an explosive argument or tears. One simple strategy is to avoid direct engagement with the topics they raise. If they bring up a gossipy story or try to bait you with a polarizing remark, offer a non-committal response like, "I'm not really following that these days," or "Let's talk about something else." If you anticipate drama at a family gathering, plan an escape route. Maybe you step outside for fresh air or leave early if conversations spiral. Over time, the drama addict may seek other people to fuel their habits, freeing you from the emotional toll they impose. It's not unkind to dodge these situations. Rather, it's self-care in action, ensuring your golden years aren't hijacked by someone else's endless craving for conflict. Lastly, there's the boundary breaker, that relative who refuses to acknowledge or respect your limits, no matter how politely or firmly you set them. It could be someone who arrives at your home unannounced, rummages through your personal belongings, or borrows items without permission. Maybe they ask intrusive questions about your finances or romantic life, ignoring your discomfort. Or perhaps they continually push you to care for their children or pets even after you've explained you're not physically able to do so. Regardless of their specific behavior, the boundary breaker behaves as though your personal space and decisions are less important than their desires. This can feel incredibly violating, especially if you're living on a fixed income or dealing with health issues that demand tranquility. The stress caused by repeated boundary violations can escalate quickly. You might struggle with insomnia, develop anxiety about phone calls or door knocks, or feel a constant undercurrent of tension in your own home. Setting boundaries with a boundary breaker calls for clarity and consistency. Rather than making vague statements like, "I'd prefer if you didn't do that," use direct language. "I do not want you to come over without calling first," or "Please don't open my mail." If they ignore these directives, consider changing your locks, adjusting your visiting hours, or limiting the times you're available by phone. Some older adults even find that they need legal recourse if boundary violations turn into financial exploitation or trespassing. It's unfortunate when family ties lead to such measures, but your safety and peace must remain paramount. As you reflect on these 5 types of toxic relatives, the constant critic, the family manipulator, the resentful dependent, the drama addict, and the boundary breaker, remember that each one can affect your life in a unique yet harmful way. You might see glimpses of more than one type in a single individual, or perhaps multiple relatives fit these descriptions. However, knowledge is power. By identifying these patterns, you gain the ability to set boundaries and take proactive steps before the damage becomes overwhelming. That doesn't mean you need to cut all ties immediately or in a harsh manner. Instead, approach the situation with clarity about what you can and cannot tolerate. It might be as simple as reducing phone calls from daily to weekly, or switching to email communication if live conversations become too volatile. Or it could mean limiting in-person visits to special occasions, where plenty of other people are around, ensuring you can politely excuse yourself when tensions rise. The goal isn't to punish anyone, it's to protect your peace, a precious asset in your 70s and beyond. Many people hesitate to enforce boundaries out of fear. Fear of stirring family drama, fear of being perceived as difficult, or fear of losing relationships altogether. But the truth is, relationships that exist only because you allow yourself to be mistreated aren't relationships worth holding onto in the same capacity. If your relative truly values you, they might be upset at first, but will ultimately respect your new limits if it means preserving a connection. If they can't handle your boundaries, it likely indicates they cared more about controlling or manipulating you than about maintaining genuine family bonds. In that case, any distance you create merely reveals a truth that already existed beneath the surface. You might feel a sting of guilt initially, especially if you've been taught all your life to keep family close, but that sting often gives way to a profound sense of relief once you realize you no longer have to walk on eggshells or endure constant negativity. It's also essential to recognize that your own well-being has a ripple effect on others around you, including the family members who do treat you with respect and kindness. When you're less burdened by toxic relatives, you can invest more of your emotional energy into nurturing those positive relationships, whether with supportive siblings, loving grandchildren, or close friends who've practically become family. You might also find yourself with more mental space to explore hobbies, travel plans, or volunteer activities that enrich your later years. The absence of toxic interactions can feel like a weight lifted from your shoulders, restoring your sense of joy and spontaneity that might have been dormant for too long. Perhaps you're wondering, what if these toxic relatives need my help physically or financially, because they have nowhere else to turn? This concern is valid, and it highlights the complexity of family ties. Helping someone in genuine need doesn't automatically require you to be their emotional punching bag or to accept disrespect. You can provide assistance within strict parameters. For example, if you have an adult child who lacks employment, You might offer them a place to stay for a limited time, but require them to contribute to household chores and to actively seek work. If they violate these terms or treat you poorly, you reserve the right to revoke that privilege. That's not cruelty, that's teaching them accountability while protecting your mental health. If your relative truly wants help, they'll adapt. If they prefer to cling to toxic behaviors, they'll look for someone else to exploit. You might also face well-intentioned relatives who urge you to just forgive and forget, or let it go because they're family. Be cautious of such advice. While forgiveness can be healing, it doesn't oblige you to resume a destructive pattern. You can forgive in your heart, releasing grudges, but still keep a boundary to protect yourself from future harm. True forgiveness doesn't equate to giving the toxic person unlimited access to your life or heart again. It simply means you're letting go of resentment so you can live peacefully. Meanwhile, forgetting can be downright dangerous, because forgetting might lead you to repeat the same mistakes, allowing the toxic cycle to continue. You deserve better than that, and your life experiences have likely taught you the importance of learning from the past rather than erasing it. The entire point of setting boundaries is to build a future in which you can flourish, not remain stuck in old conflicts. Some older adults worry about being alone if they distance themselves from certain relatives, especially if they have a small family or limited social circles. While this fear is understandable, maintaining ties with those who constantly harm or stress you is an even riskier trade-off. Instead, you can channel energy into forming or strengthening connections with friends, neighbors, church communities, or senior centers that provide uplifting companionship. You might also find it easier to connect with extended family members or in-laws who treat you kindly. Emotional well-being thrives on quality, not quantity, of relationships. If cutting off or minimizing contact with a toxic family member creates a gap, you can fill that gap with more constructive, mutually supportive connections. After 70, you might have different perspectives on life, perhaps embracing simpler joys or living in the moment more deeply. Don't let these toxic relatives steal your sense of wonder or gratitude. You've earned the right to spend your days free from constant criticism, manipulation, resentment, drama, and boundary violations. With each boundary you set, you communicate respect for yourself, and you encourage others to do the same. Some relatives might eventually change their behavior once they see you're serious about your limits. Others might drift away, which can feel sad at first but often leads to a more peaceful lifestyle in the long run. In either case, you remain in control of your emotional sphere, deciding who gets close enough to influence your feelings. If you've made it this far, consider writing, "I choose peace," in the comments to show that you're committed to protecting your mental and emotional well-being. And if you're still on the fence about how to proceed with a specific relative, try starting small. You could limit your phone conversations to 10 minutes, or skip certain discussion topics that always lead to tension. If you sense improvement, great. If they continue disrespecting you, that's your cue to step back further. Life after 70 should be about savoring the time you have left, not contending with relatives who bring chaos or negativity. Seek out those who appreciate and celebrate you, and cultivate relationships that nourish your spirit. You're not being selfish. You're practicing healthy self-care. Over time, you'll likely realize that removing or reducing toxic influences was one of the wisest decisions you could have made. Thank you for listening to these reflections on toxic relatives you'd be better off avoiding after turning 70. If you found any part of this message helpful or thought-provoking, please share it with someone who could use a reminder that age doesn't require us to tolerate disrespect. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you won't miss more content on living your best life in your golden years. Remember, no matter your age, you deserve kindness, respect, and emotional safety. By steering clear of those who can't offer that, you protect your precious time and energy for the people and activities that genuinely enrich your life. Here's to the peaceful, fulfilling journey that awaits once you grant yourself permission to put your own serenity first.